In the last month, you may have seen the news about the dispute in the South China Sea. You would have also read about India exporting its first set of BrahMos missile systems to a Southeast Asian country, the Philippines. Today, we have with us the ambassador of the Philippines to India, His Excellency Josel Francisco Ignacio, to discuss all of these issues and more on ThePrint. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and greetings to all the followers.
My first question, sir, like I had mentioned, the Philippines was the first country to import these BrahMos missile systems from India. We are seeing more talks of deeper defense partnerships. There are questions, of course, from certain sections of the US strategic community whether the Philippines can use these weapons or whatever. But for us, the interest is what next, sir? What is the next for Philippines-India defense ties? Are you looking at more systems? How is this going forward from here, sir?
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to address this question. I think it behooves me to lay out at the first instance that the Philippines' foreign policy is to be a friend to all, an enemy to none. Our president and our previous administrations have emphasized that, have been very emphatic about that. BrahMos is an important element of our armed forces modernization, which is currently being pursued along the lines of a comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. The Philippines being, an archipelago of over 7,641 islands. And so that's the philosophy by which we are pursuing modernization. BrahMos is an important element of that. As I have said in many fora, BrahMos gives us credible deterrence, provides us credible defense, but it is part of a larger picture. And what we intend to do is to build our deterrent capability with a multitude of partners. And we are pleased that India has risen to become one of those partners in our defense modernization. Of course, it goes beyond equipment acquisition. We would also want to build our capability to maintain, to operate, to upgrade. So it's a more comprehensive approach. Defense equipment importation and acquisitions from India is just one aspect of a larger defense relationship. That is also, I'm happy to say, very, very rapidly rising and expanding. We have military education and training. I'm happy to say that we have Filipino cadets in Dehradun, in Chennai, now in Indian military academies. Defense to defense and military to military dialogues, exchanges of views on issues of common concern also play an important part in this relationship. As are many other aspects, and I'm happy that to tell our audience that the defense relationship is burgeoning across many fronts.
Right, and this brings me to this question, right? Because last month we had news or information here about sort of clashes in the South China Sea where a Filipino soldier was injured. Then there was a reciprocal access agreement signed between the Philippines and Japan. So we're seeing sort of different moves and strategies when it comes to a territorial dispute that was, as per the 2016 arbitration award, the territory was granted to the Philippines. And this is a position that India has supported publicly as well. Most recently, Mr. Jaishankar in Manila. So in that sense, just the question is in two parts. One is, what is the sense of the situation happening there? And two, whether there have been conversations with India and, what is Manila's viewpoint of New Delhi's role in this conflict, given that India itself has its own territorial concerns with on its eastern borders, for example?
Thank you. Well, to the extent that state-to-state relations are also, in the end, follow almost the psychology of people, and certain common issues, common threads tend to build and reinforce relationships, and that goes for states as well. And I think that's what we see happening also with the Philippines and India. I'm happy that you mentioned the arbitral award because just a few days ago, on July 12, we marked the 8th anniversary of that very important part of international law. And it's not just to clarify that the arbitral award talks more about entitlements rather than sovereignty issues, but it's an important clarification that benefits not just the parties to the case, but in fact, even those who are not party to the case, in the sense that the arbitral award has clarified certain important provisions of the own clause in terms of how to interpret, for instance, regime of islands and very technical aspects, but all very important to us. Now, indeed, the tensions have sort of become of great concern recently, over the past few months, and there have been moves by the Philippines to de-escalate. As our president himself has articulated, we are of course talking to partners, and our relationship, our dialogue with partners, our exchange of views with partners, form a very important element of our diplomacy on the South China Sea issue. And we are very, very pleased that India is part of that circle of our very close friends with whom we regularly exchange views and provide some information by which we can mutually benefit in terms of creating a larger picture of what we confront in the larger Indo-Pacific. So I'm glad that in March, Minister Jai Shankar in Manila reiterated India's support for the Philippines' efforts to uphold its sovereignty. That's a very important statement that goes beyond that that instance in March, and we know that that's India's policy, and we know that India is a reliable friend that with whom we can always engage on issues of particular importance, such as this one.
Right, and you mentioned close partners and a reliable friend, but this was not always the case. 75 years of ties, we've been friends talking, but there's been a recent deepening of this relationship, whether from a strategic sense, whether from a defense sense, whether trade. So I just want an understanding for our viewers as the reasons for this deepening of ties between Manila and New Delhi. So.
Yeah, I think as I have mentioned in my previous response, it's undeniable that certain common causes and common threads have sort of brought the two countries together. But that's not the complete picture. I do acknowledge, and both sides acknowledge, that in previous decades there had been a relative somnolence to the relationship. But we're very, very pleased that over the past decade especially, there's a noticeable intensification of ties, noticed not just by India and the Philippines itself, but also by third countries, by the larger populace, by scholars. And I think this newfound closeness, this renaissance in the relationship, is brought about not just by a narrow set of issues in the security arena. I think credit should go to both countries for recognizing and realizing that there's a broader overarch. There's a broader set of issues and areas of potential benefit that have not been fully explored before, that we need to give full play to. And that extends not just to the security and defense arena, as we have been discussing for the most part, but there's the economic side, trade, functional cooperation in newer areas, financial technology, outer space, education, people-to-people relations. So just a vast menu of items and issues and areas of opportunity that both countries now see will redound to the mutual benefit of both of us, the Philippines and India especially, having so much common ground, both fast-rising economies, faster, compared to the regional peers, growing faster compared to regional peers, and also, I think very importantly, we have to mention that India and the Philippines have been vanguards of democracy. We have these shared values, democratic values, unity in diversity. Those things also bring us together. So, a broader set of issues are now coming into play and driving the relationship forward.
Right, and when you mention this broadening, I think one part of this, of course, is our trade ties, and I think it's about close to $3 billion, which one would argue is not too high when, for example, India and the US has $100 billion,
Indeed.
or India and the European Union has 90 billion, and these are much further away geographically than the Philippines. So again, a two-part question is what is the challenges there, and how do you see that changing? And then you've also publicly spoken about a preferential trade agreement. So how do you see these sort of goals, achievable goals, in the next, say, 2 or 3 years to improve or increase trade ties?
Okay. Well, thank you. As Philippine ambassador, and I'm sure as my colleagues and headquarters in the Philippines with the firm, we celebrate every gain. And for us, this is an important milestone, reaching 3.1 billion US dollars in trade for the first time. And we are very happy because we see that this as a sort of forward motion on which we can build on in the coming years. As you have said, indeed, this is, compared to the US, it's paltry. Compared to even our neighbors in ASEAN, this is relatively small. And this, we see an acknowledgement, we acknowledge that there's plenty of room for us to ramp up trade, by and by over the medium term. And this is our hope, which is why we are looking at various modalities. I think the challenge has been finding complementarities, given that many of the products, between the two countries are almost similar. So we're looking for those areas and gaps where, we can undertake fruitful and gainful trade between our countries. And this is part of the exercise, and I think the rationale behind the decision by both countries, I think in 2020, to jumpstart preferential trade agreement negotiations. Right now, both sides are engaged in discussing the terms of reference that will guide the negotiations. But by and by, we are getting very close to starting the negotiations proper. I think the idea there, derives from what I have mentioned, which is to find those avenues, to find those specific product lines where trade can be beneficial. And the PTA that we are considering is not just the only avenue. I think later this month, the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement will also begin a review. So there are, parallel mechanisms also that will serve to benefit trade between the Philippines and India. So we are looking at all these potentialities and areas of opportunity.
Right, and I just want to, you had mentioned a little bit earlier in one of your answers about financial technologies and this, and now about these avenues. So just something comes to mind is India's push to sort of spread UPI and sort of payments in this, in these kind of forms, localized payments. And is there something in the works between Philippines and India in this sense to sort of improve these kind of ties?
Yes, well, the India, of course, UPI. It's very convenient living here. I'm a huge and avid fan of using this kind of financial technology. The Philippines also, is a growing market for fintech, especially if there's anything that if there's anything good that came out of the pandemic, is that it drove up e-commerce and created reasons for countries to build up financial technology. The consumers become more reliant on it. And in the Philippines, that happened as well. And now we are looking at other partner countries from whom we can benefit in terms of know-how, and not just know-how, but in terms of actually looking at systems that already work abroad that we can probably also fit into the Philippine context. And the Indian UPI system, I think, has proven to be one of those systems that have worked wonders for the Indian economy. And yes, indeed, we are looking at that. And so I think between the Philippines and India, we have an MOU, for instance, on financial technology. We created a working group in order to exchange views and look at practical cooperation that can be done. So we have started along that path as well.
Right, and that brings me to my last question, because this November, I believe, would be 75 years of Philippines and India ties. If I remember correctly, in 2019, the then Indian President, Mr. Ramnath Kovind, visited Manila and had, I think, a 2-day or a 3-day visit there to celebrate 70 years of ties. For 75, is there anything special in the pipeline? Are we looking at reciprocal visits, maybe anything to signify 75 years?
Well, I have to say at the outset that part of the growing closeness in the relationship over the past decade has been reflected in very high-level engagement up to the level of the leaders. And indeed, as you had mentioned, Honorable President Ramnath Kovind was in Manila. I was privileged to have been part of the team that received him and that worked on that visit way back in 2019 for the 70th anniversary. And in the same way that we honored our anniversary with such a high-level visit in 2019, a similar kind of high-level interaction, is certainly in the agenda of both countries this year. I mean, what better way to celebrate the relationship? So we are, in deep discussions with our Indian friends, with the Ministry of External Affairs, to try to make this happen this year. And that is our big hope, and we look forward to that very much this year.
Right. Thank you, Ambassador. That was my final question, and thank you for joining us here at ThePrint.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.